So this will be a presentation about my virtual field experience. So how did I provide help and facilitate the learning of students? So there was a Google slide that was given to us before we went and taught the students and then facilitated a discussion. And I went through every slide of the Google slides that was given to us, and I went through each of them thoroughly. After every slide, I asked the students if they had any questions, and sometimes they did, so I think it was good that I asked just to make sure that they were all following along. And before I went over the slides, I made sure that my students knew that I was open for any questions or comments, and I asked them to interrupt me if they were confused at any part of the slides. And that did happen sometime as well, where the students would interrupt me real quick just for a quick clarification question, which I welcomed. I was happy they did, because I did not want them to be confused. So how did I use technology in my teaching? How did it contribute to student learning, and would I change anything if I taught the same content? So I use the screen share function on Microsoft Teams to show the Google Slides, and there's another document given to us to help facilitate the discussion. And I shared this document so that it was a lot easier for the students to follow along. As well as I also, and in the second bullet point, I say that I use the chat feature to share links. They had the link, they had the document as well, so they could follow along there, but I also shared it just to make sure that if there was any confusion as to where we were, that they knew what was going on. And I also shared a Google Doc that I created, which helped us facilitate the discussion even better, because it allowed them to write down some information about their perspectives that was going on during the discussion. And I think it helped contribute to student learning, because without the tech, I think it would have been a lot more choppy and a lot more difficult to keep the discussion going. And I would only change how I presented the assignment initially, because I was a bit sloppy at the very beginning with how I introduced the information, but later it turned out pretty smooth. So what did I do well? I believe that I was very charismatic, because when the students spoke into the discussion or asked questions, it did not feel like they had to force the questions out. It seemed like they were pretty comfortable speaking with me. And I think this is important, especially in discussions, because you get kind of the best ideas out of the students. I also believe that I established what I expected and how I felt about certain behaviors pretty well. So I just made sure that they knew that if I called them, I would prefer that they unmute themselves and answer, and stuff like that. So what did I struggle with? I struggled in the structure a little bit, in the transitions from one topic to the next. And my fundamental understanding of the assignment was a bit lackluster, basically just because I thought I didn't have any questions before we were supposed to start presenting, but as soon as we started, I found there were some that showed themselves. But at the end of the day, I got it all figured out, and it was relatively smooth, but it could have been smoother if I would have had those questions answered before. How will I improve? I will study on the topic and the fundamental ideas behind the assignments a bit more before I go into a situation where I need to present the stuff, which is just good in general for anything that you're about to present, like know what you're going to present. And I did for like 90% of the time, but there was a few parts that were a little bit confusing to me that I had to figure out during the presentation, which is not the most optimal. And I'll put myself in more situations where I need to facilitate discussions or present information just to accrue more experience and knowledge about the process of doing things like that. Basically just presenting more things and putting myself in places where I have to lead a group of people to an idea, or just lead a discussion in general. And I think doing that more will give me better experience and intuition as to do when there's pressure on me to perform. What did I learn? I learned that having the students comfortable is essential for facilitating a strong discussion. Because if they're holding back because they're not comfortable sharing, or they're not comfortable being who they are, the discussion won't be as rich. Meaning there's not going to be as great of ideas shared, because they're just going to share what's the most easy, and they're not going to share anything that could be controversial, which is usually some of the best stuff in a discussion. I learned that there is a lot more that goes into class discussions that I did not know about. So before, I thought they were just pretty easy. You just kind of sit down and start talking, but there's actually a lot that goes into them to make them smooth. And that is something that I learned, and that is something that I will remember and keep in mind for my future discussions. So yeah, that was my presentation on my virtual field experience.